Are RBIs really important? So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've wanted to create a new stat to kind of change the way we track RBIs because something seems off, just like this isn't straight. So RBIs are obviously incredibly important. We play baseball, and the point of baseball is to score runs. So scoring runs and knocking in runs should be a true way to track how well a player is doing, right? I guess it's more of a true way to track how well a team is doing because there's so many other factors that you can't control that could help you get RBIs, right? Like obviously players on the Dodgers get more RBIs than players on the White Sox, and obviously a guy hitting fourth is more likely to get a bunch of RBIs than a guy hitting ninth. Reason being is because the guy who hits fourth, the 1, 2, and 3 hitter in your lineup, probably have a higher on-base percentage than the guys who are 6, 7, and 8 in your lineup, much less likely to get on base. And so throughout the course of a season, the cleanup hitter's probably just going to have more opportunities to get RBIs. So when we look at MLB players like Pete Alonso and Nolan Arenado, those are guys who come to my mind as those are RBI guys. Those are stats they always seem to do really well in, because they're not really on teams that have the most run production, and they are not guys who really excel in other stats like OPS and stuff. I mean, they are obviously really good, well above average hitters, but they just seem to have a level of clutch to them, and RBIs seems to translate that or show that. But could we find a way to track the clutchness, is that a word, of other hitters throughout a lineup? And so, over my spring break, I actually finally thought, and I've been thinking about this for years, but I finally thought of a way to track this. And it's a little complicated, and I still need some help ironing it out. And so that's why I'm presenting it to you guys. I'm going to lay out what I've come up with so far and how I think I would like this stat to operate, but I also don't really have a way to track it unless it were tracked live time throughout MLB games, and it really isn't something that could be applied to college or high school level at this point. And even then, I'm not entirely sure that my quantities are as clean as they could be. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, let me know down in the comments. But let's dive into it as I take a couple of swings and try to figure out what exactly I'm going to say to explain this. So, the way I want to set this up is I want to figure out how many RBIs the average MLB hitter would have if they had the exact same opportunities as you. And so the way that it'll be calculated in its simplest form would be this. Your number of RBIs on the season will be on the numerator side of the equation, and that would be divided by the number of RBIs the average MLB hitter would have in the same situations. And that denominator is really what I'm a little less secure of in my calculation. And so obviously the numerator is really easy to put in because you could just go to any player's stat page and pull up how many RBIs they got in a season. Boom, there's the top half of your equation. But for the bottom half, what we're going to have to do is for every single at-bat, you have to come up with a quantity of what percentage of an RBI the hitter is expected to come away with from that at-bat, given his situation, right? So if you come up with nobody on base, like we said, you're expected to get 3.6% of an RBI. If you come up with a runner on first, probably have a slightly higher likelihood of getting RBI. If there's a runner on second, it's a higher likelihood. If there's a runner on third, your probability of getting an RBI is increased. And obviously, if there's a runner on third with 2 outs, that's different than a runner on third with less than 2 outs, because then a sac fly works or it doesn't work. And so one thing we have to do for this equation is come up with the probability a runner scores from each situation or each base, right? So scoring from home, you have a 3.6% chance. Given that the only way you can do this is on a home run, really, that's the only way you get yourself in as an RBI, and an MLB player does that 3.6% of the time. But scoring from first, what is the probability of that? Well, obviously, if a player hits a home run, the runner can score from first, 3.6% of the time again. But also, if a hitter hits a triple, the runner from first can also score there. And last year, in the MLB, triples were hit 0.4% of the time. But then it gets tricky because if a hitter hits a double, how often does a runner score from first in that situation? I would say it's probably a little more than half the time, since doubles were hit 4.7% of the time in the MLB last year. What I did is said that basically 2/3 of doubles would result in a runner scoring from first. Now that's not precise at all, that's my estimate. I would really like to know what percentage of doubles runners actually scored from first on, and I could input that. So basically though, what we do is we take the percentage of home runs, percentage of triples, and 2/3 of doubles, add those together. That's the chance a runner would score from first. Now with a runner on second, obviously he would score with home runs, he would score with triples, he would score with doubles, I would say 100% of the time, and then he would score on singles, 50% of the time. Again, that's one where I don't have an exact calculation, but there's a good amount of time where a hitter hits a single and a guy can score from second. pretty easily. Then we have scoring from third with 2 outs. And basically, this is just if you get a hit, they'll score, right? Don't get out, the runner's going to get in. And since MLB batting averages last year were 244, that gives you a 244 chance of the average MLB hitter getting the RBI with a runner on third. But if there are less than 2 outs, well, then just putting the ball in play can score a runner a good amount of time. But like what percentage of the time, right? So we have all hits will score a runner from third. A sac fly will score him. Certain ground balls will also score him. Sometimes you can even ground into a double play and score a runner from third. What exactly is the percentage of times where a ball is put in play where a runner can't score from third with less than 2 outs? I really don't know that number. So what I did for this one, I just used the rate that an average MLB hitter puts the ball in play, which is 74.8% of the time. So with the average MLB hitter up, there's a 74.8% chance that a runner from third would score with less than 2 outs. Now, we have our probability of scoring situations for each runner on base, and there's obviously one more, which is the bases loaded, which is basically a runner on third, but then you have to add in the percentages of walks and hit by pitches in the MLB. But we're not really done yet, right? Like if you come up to bat with a runner on second, we're not just going to add to the denominator the probability of that runner from second scoring, because you still also have the chance to knock in yourself as an RBI. So we have to come up with a different value for each situation that a hitter comes up to bat with. So this is basically the base for what we use to come up with value that each at bat has given the situation. And that value that each at bat has, that's what we add to the denominator of your equation to figure out how valuable your at bats were throughout the season, to see if the RBIs you came away with exceeded the value that you were given or what you were expected to come away with, or if you came away with giving less value to your team than what was expected of you. And so basically this is just called like the value expectation added to the denominator. And it would go as follows, right? So an at bat with nobody on, it's again this 3.6% chance of a home run. That would be added to the denominator. If you have an at bat with a runner on first, you have the probability of a runner scoring from first, but also the probability of you scoring yourself, which is a 10.3% chance. Now, you may think that is a little high, but you have to understand the 3.4% chance of hitting a home run is not just 1 RBI. That's 2 RBIs, so the home run value is now doubled here. Having a runner on second, you basically need to come away with 0.19 RBIs. Runner on first and second, now we have to add the probability of a runner on second scoring, the probability of a runner on first scoring, and the probability of a runner scoring from home, yourself. So now we have the capability of 3 RBIs, along with the fact that that RBI on second is easier. And so that's basically, you're expected to come away with a quarter of an RBI for each situation. Or I guess the easier way to look at this is if you were to have 4 at-bats with a runner on first and second, you would be expected to come away with at least 1 RBI. Basically, now that I'm going through this, I'm realizing I don't want to talk about each and every one of these. It's a lot of values, but I'm going to put them on the screen right now. Basically, just know that the value is their probability of scoring from their base added together, because obviously you could walk away with multiple RBIs. So basically, 1, I need the ability to track every single at-bat of an MLB hitter and the situation he came up with to make this stat a reality, and that's kind of the hard part. And also knowing like what percentage of the time does a runner from first score on a double, what percentage of the time does a runner score from second on a single, what percentage of the time does a ball in play actually score the runner from third when it's in play as an out, right? Knowing those things would help make this stat a little bit more accurate, but I want to touch on exactly why I set it up the way I did and what it's made to do. Right, so if you come up with nobody on base and you hit a solo home run, basically it's 1 divided by 0.036. That is a massive boost to this equation. Reason being, because that's incredibly difficult to do. So you're being rewarded big time for getting difficult RBIs. But also, you're not really being penalized for failing to get an RBI in that situation, right? Because if you get out, it's 0 divided by 0.036. And so that's the first step of the stat. It rewards you for difficult RBI successes. Second step is like with the bases loaded, less than 2 outs, I mean, you need to be walking away with an RBI here. The probability actually of getting RBI is 1.099, meaning that if you just get 1 RBI, you actually kind of underperformed by the slightest amount. And so basically what this stat is doing is saying that when you're in a situation where an RBI is easier, it is more important that you actually come away with that RBI. And so it rewards you for doing something big, and it punishes you for failing to be clutch. When you actually are clutch and do your job, well then cool, you'll be helped out by the stat a little bit, as really the bases loaded less than 2 outs is the only thing where you're expected to get an RBI all the time. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's about all I can say about it to this point. It's really complex, but I feel like it's the best way I've come up with to gauge clutch, really kind of looking at when players are expected to do something and judging them for when they fail to do it and giving them a pass when they do their job, and also equalizing things across the board as far as what are the situations where you came up to bat. Because if you had at bats that were just less valuable, where there was just a runner on first or nobody on base a bunch of the time when you came up to bat, you wouldn't be expected to get as many RBIs, but it would still be able to kind of even the board between a guy like Pete Alonso and a guy like Mason Wynn, who's hitting ninth or leadoff and just doesn't have the opportunity, kind of equalize and look across the board to see how they are taking advantage of their situations. So basically, the way it'll work and divide out is if your RBIs are greater than the number of expected RBIs, when you do the division, the number will be greater than 1. That would mean you're above average clutch. And if you had less RBIs than expected, you divide your RBIs by the average number of RBIs a hitter would have, then your stat will be less than 1. And so that would mean that you're really not that clutch of a hitter. So that's what I got so far. Like I said, it's going to take a little while to get any sort of implementation, and some of the values probably do need to be brushed up to be made a little bit more accurate, but that's what I got so far. So hope you guys found this entertaining, and give me your thoughts down in the comments on how we can continue to make this stat better.